This is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you're in the right place. Welcome to our flower series. In this video, we're going to be piping buttercream daylilies. As always, it's divided into sections, so you can skip ahead, rewind, and rewatch as desired. So let's get started making the colors for our daylilies. I've got some American style buttercream divided up into 4 cups, just a little bit in each, and we're going to use the following liquid gel colors: lemon yellow, sunset orange, red, buckeye brown, oh, there it is, and finally, some sky blue. And I have just a little bit of my lemon yellow, sunset orange, and sky blue out on my container lid. And the first color I'm going to make is a nice little yellow. So I'm just going to start because we want some bright, intense colors with like 1 or 2 drops, depending on how vivid you want that shade to be. And I'm just going to go in with a tiny touch of that orange and just add a little bit of that. Mix it around and check it out. So we're looking for a nice kind of eggy golden yellow. It's hopefully going to line up in our bag perfectly and make the centers of our petals. And that's beautiful. Nice, bright, vivid color. And our second color is going to be our orange. So I've got a little more in the container because I'm going to need a little more of that. And I just want to start with 2 nice drops of my orange. And then I'm going to go in with 1 of my red. I just want it to be a nice, deep, kind of bittersweet orange color. So adding just a little bit of red to it is a great way to go. And this should give us a nice, beautiful shade of orange. It's kind of perfect for fall. There we have a beautiful color. You can see it's got that nice kind of in-between vibe to it. It's nice and intense, but it's somewhere in between orange and red, and that's just going to be perfect for what we want to achieve. So our third color is going to be some green, and I'm going to go in with just a couple of specks of my lemon yellow, and then just about half as many with my sky blue. I just want to make a nice green color. It's going to kind of pop against the orange and the yellow that we made without being too intense that it really detracts from them. We want it to kind of give us some nice contrast, but we don't want it to stand out too much. I think that's nice. It's a little seafoamy for me right now, so I'm just going to add a tiny touch more yellow. I want it to have a bit more of a citrusy vibe to it. So a little more yellow is a great way to go. And that is going to be fantastic there in the center of our flowers. It's a nice green without being too bright. And we're going to finish up by making some brown. So just a little bit of buttercream. We don't need too much. And I'll probably just take 2 drops. We want to make a nice shade of brown that's kind of rich. So think nice kind of dark chocolate vibes. I'll get this mixed around and see if we need to add some more. She might take 1 more drop just to get us where we want to go. I'll add just a little more color, just to give it a little more intensity. There we go. It'll darken some too as it sits, so I think that's going to be nice, beautiful shade of brown. So for this project, we're going to use 3 bags. We fitted 2 of them with couplers and 1 just directly with the tip. So we've used a coupler on the green because we're going to change tips, and I've used one on my orange and yellow combo just in case I get any clogs, problems, or need to adjust my tip because I've striped the bag. For my bag of brown, we've used a number 2 tip. For the green, we're starting with a 352 or a V-shaped leaf tip. And we'll also use a number 5 and a number 104. For my yellow and orange bag, I've also used a number 352. And you'll notice that the points on this tip are lined up with the yellow frosting striped in the bag. So let's talk about the techniques that we're going to use to create our daylily. And the first thing we're going to do is make some little, I call them leaf spikes. These are kind of like little supports. They're not actually going to be little leaves, but they're just going to act as a little bit of help to keep things upright and supported. And what I want to do with these is, rather than holding the bag like I normally would, which is a 45-degree angle, and touching down with one of those points, I'm actually going to hold it straight up and down. And I'm just going to squeeze until I get a nice fat leaf and then pull straight up, right? So it's just a little leaf-shaped spike that's going to act as a support for some of our petals. So the next thing we're going to do that's a little different is we're going to pipe a support cone. If you've done things like our daffodil flowers that have a center trumpet, it's going to be a little bit like that, except we're going to go directly on our flower nail, and it's going to be one of the first things that we do. So we're going to take the tip, and instead of holding it straight up and down, we're actually going to angle it a little bit out, and that's going to give us this kind of little V-shaped cone in the middle that we can pipe our petals on and allow us to give them a little bit of support and help them stand upright, and then help the edges flop over a little bit. So it's essentially going to help shape our flower but not be seen kind of like the mound that's underneath a rose. So we'll show you this directly on the nail because it's a little hard to spin the tray and show you what to do on our actual little tray here, but just know we're going to use our 104 in kind of an unusual way today, and we're going to make that little cone to help support everything. Spikes. So we're going to use these for stamens and also the pistil. So I'm going to use the number 2 for stamens, so they're going to be brown. We're going to do the same thing with the number 5, it's just going to be bigger. And what we're going to do is straight up and down with the bag, hold a little above the surface, squeeze till you get a dot, and then pull straight up. And that's going to give us a nice kind of little hairy spike that's great for stamens for the centers of flowers. And dots. Dots are something we've done a lot of. In this case, we're using our number 2, and they're just going to be tiny little ones if you want to on your petals. And you just want to hold right above the surface, give it a nice squeeze, make a nice full dot, stop, and then spin it around. So they're going to be really tiny in this case. And finally, petals. We're going to use our 352 for this. We want to pull nice and slow, and we're going to hold it like we traditionally would. Nice 45-degree angle, a point touching the surface, and we're going to pull nice and slow to create nice fat petals. And when we want to make the end, we'll just start kind of tapering off our pressure and pull away. And you can see, since we striped the bag, we get that little streak of yellow in the center, which is lovely. So let's talk about how we use those techniques that we just discussed to build our daylily blossom. The first thing we're going to do is pipe the support cone on our nail. So it's just going to give us a little cup kind of there in the center of our flower nail. And then we're going to go ahead and pipe 3 of those little leaf spikes. And I'm going to almost hold them sideways. So I'm going to line that little V-shaped opening right up with the side of my cone, and I'm going to squeeze so it's nice and fat and full, and then pull up. And my goal is to get the spike to come past the top of that cone just a little bit, and it's going to act as a support for some of our petals. Once we get that kind of center support system built for ourselves, we're going to go ahead and switch over to our bag of orange and yellow, and we're going to pipe 3 petals on the outside of the cone. So we're going to go in between the little supports we made and pull 3 shorter petals, and you want to think about hugging that cone with the frosting, kind of building it up along the sides and then pulling away at the top, right? So just kind of go straight up that side and then kick it out just a tiny bit to get those little petals. Once we've done the 3 outside petals, we're going to go ahead and do 3 inside petals. And these will most likely be a little bit larger than the outside ones that you're going to do because they're going to have more support. They're going to be resting against the cone, and they're going to have that little spike to kind of hang out on top of, right? So we've kind of built up the little support system for these bigger petals so we can make them a little bit larger. So we're going to kind of hug the inside of that cone, make it nice and fat and full so it takes up some good area in there, pull it up the side, and then out as far as we can kind of get away with. We're going to then switch to our bag of green again. With the number 5 tip, we'll do a pistil in the center, so we have a nice little pop of green in there. And then we'll switch to our bag of brown. This is where you can put some little dots on those petals if you want. If it feels a little scary, you can skip that. And then we're gonna go in and just fill in that center, close up any little gaps, fill in any little areas that look messy or anything like that, where everything's kind of touching down in the middle, and pull in some of those great little hairy stamens. Let's talk about how to get started. I've got my 104 tip on my bag of green. I've got the fat end right there in the center, and I'm just gonna walk it out. Well, it's probably like about 1/8 of an inch, not too much. And then I'm just gonna rock the outside, right, that skinny tip into the tip out just a little bit, just a few degrees. And then I'm gonna squeeze and spin. And you can see this is going to give me a nice little cone here that I can finish up. So it kind of leans out just a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect. And that's going to give us a nice little support system for those petals. So the next thing that we are going to do is hold that bag straight up and down. I've got 352 on it. And I'm just going to kind of glide along the side and pipe those 3 little support spike leaves. And you can see they're going to come up past the cone. And I want them to be kind of equidistant. So think about like a peace sign, just kind of dividing that circle approximately in thirds. And it's totally fine if they kind of push your little cone in a tiny bit. Just take your time and get them spaced out nicely. So you can see it looks a little bit like a weird kind of fort, and it's got some flying buttresses on it. That's looking perfect. We've got our bag of orange and yellow out. It's got that 352 on it. And now we're gonna pipe our first 3 petals. So we're gonna go in between 2 of those supports, just right there in the middle, right up next to it, just nice and fat and big, really as big as you can get it. And if you go nice and slow, you'll be able to get really great points. And you can see it fills up the space between those 2. Just go into the next spot and really nice and slow, let that frosting balloon out and then pull up slowly. The fatter and thicker they are, the more supported and sturdy they'll be. So now we'll just go in. And put in that last one. There we go. For our next step, we are going to put that bag of 352 down in the center of that little cone that we made, and our goal is to pipe right over these little supports that we made. So we're going to do a nice big petal right over top. And if you need to, change the angle of your bag a little bit, especially to start with, and just let those petals take up that center area. So just nice and big and pull out. So just go right down in there. If you need to, make yourself a little room. You can always nudge your frosting just a little bit. Let it balloon out and get yourself a really nice big leaf, petal. Sorry, I'm using a leaf tip and I always want to call them leaves and not petals. So just stick it right down in there and let it balloon out, especially when you get to the top, and really take up that space. And since we have that little support, you can really pull some nice dramatic petals there. And you can see we've already got that nice little lily look to it. And we're just going to go ahead and add on some finishing details. For our first little center detail, we're going to use that number 5 tip with our green. And we're going to pull a nice fat spike. So let it balloon out, get a nice ball, and really give it some drama. Our next little bit is going to be to add some little dots. So just anywhere. You think needs it, just a little tiny little dot of brown on those petals will help really add a nice little realistic touch. I just like to do a few little quick ones just to get a little hint of color on there. And then to kind of finish things off and pull some attention towards the center, I'll just give it some really quick, really long stamens. Just really let them flop over and do their thing. And if you want to add an extra special touch, you can always add that little bit of pollen. To the end of your stamen, but it honestly doesn't even need it. So if you want to, you can just leave it off. But there we have a wonderful little daylily. That's all for this lesson. If you enjoyed it, try checking out some of our other great flower series tutorials. If you have any ideas, suggestions, comments, or questions for us, we would love to hear from you in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecoratingschool.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.